Nacho. So
we love you, Kiko.
We've had a great time speaking. That's right. We should include bad chefs in our lives. We just need to include everybody.
That's right. They learn.
There you go. We've had a great time speaking to the author of the Inclusivity Superheroes. Our guest has been Crystal Foote. Crystal, this has been a blast. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, Jed. I appreciate it.
Before we invite our guest into the studio, I would love to invite you to visit a very special website. It's clownswithoutborders.org. Clownswithoutborders.org. This is a group that I absolutely adore. I am part of Clowns Without Borders, and I had the honor of being part of the 2023 tour of El Salvador. I had so much fun joining with artists from all over the world to bring a smile to people who really needed it and really appreciated it too. And we would love for you to join us as a monthly Joy Maker. The Joy Makers, they're a family of people just like you who love to laugh and make other people feel good. So please take a moment and visit clownswithoutborders.org and consider joining me as a Joy Maker. Join us right now from the beautiful state of Connecticut. We could actually get together and have a cup of coffee right after this. Our guest is here today to celebrate a book that she co-wrote with her 13-year-old son. It's called Sound Switch Wonder. Please welcome to the show, Dr. Christine Coe. Hey, Dr. Christine, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me, Jed.
I'm delighted to have you on. This sounds like a fascinating book. The title is really attention-getting. Tell us about what Sound Switch Wonder is all about, please.
Sound Switch Wonder is a picture book that has a main character with cochlear implants. That's one thing, one major thing. And I wanted to kind of get out there through a picture book, so through pictures, what cochlear implants really look like. Because even as a physician, honestly, I didn't know what they looked like. And when my son has cochlear implants as well. And when my son and I, when he was younger and we would be walking around, especially non-New Haven cities, people would comment on them and say there were two main things they would say. One, they would assume that it was some sort of Bluetooth device that, he was two.
I want one of those.
Yeah. They'd be like, oh, and so sometimes it would be a little like, kind of like, oh, like your child has Bluetooth devices on, kind of as if it was cute, not judgmental, but okay, that's cute. But sometimes you'd be judgmental, like, why does your child, kind of like, oh, Bluetooth devices on your 2-year-old? It's kind of like, yeah, why would I put Bluetooth devices on my 2-year-old? All the way to, in New York City, there was, someone who started yelling at me on the street, like, get those off your child. What are you doing to him? Like, he needs to, like, not have those on his head. And, just, complete stranger just yelling at us. And so, it was interesting that, I just thought, okay, so that was one thing I wanted. And at that time I was looking for books that he could see himself mirrored, which I've heard you talk about on this show, which I think is so important. And there were some books, but mainly they were about the surgery experience, so sort of like what our family, my son, did go through, like, oh, I'm diagnosed with hearing impairment, and so I need to go to the doctor, and then, oh, I need surgery, etc. So that kind of experience. And I just wanted it to be a story. Mm-hmm. And so then the other thing I wanted to do was try to show that no sound can be beautiful.
Mm. That's something when I was reading on the website that I want to talk about. But before I do, I certainly can relate to your experience. The people who listen to the podcast know that I had an accident that required surgery, and so as part of the recovery, I moved from a wheelchair into a walker and then into these $6 million man bionic looking braces on both of my legs, and I know I would go into a restaurant and people were like, what is that coming towards me? And being an old man, I just kind of knew it, and it's like, yeah, look at these. These are weird, aren't they? But I imagine it. That's a little bit more challenging for a kid to have people stare at you and look at you like, oh, what's that stuff? And certainly having somebody yell at you, and having someone yell at you in New York City isn't all that unusual.
Right.
But it's certainly uncomfortable. And, if your son was older, I'm sure it would have been very uncomfortable for him.
Well, I think you have a really good point. I have listened to your podcast. I did know that about your accident and the wheelchair. I didn't know about the bionic looking, legs for a while. And I think that even just spending a little time with you right now online, I realize you seem, and I heard, that you do, you're a clown as well. I think maybe you have much more than me, I'm assuming, a comfort level with being noticed, like being in the spotlight. And honestly, I think that's something that I really had to learn to be okay with, through being with my son and wanting to model once he's older, because I figured, hopefully, right, all parents, I think, knock on wood, our children don't remember exactly what happens from like birthday all the way, to maybe like age 3 at least, because we make a lot of mistakes without intending to. And I will say I was very uncomfortable. I think you hit the nail on the head with people staring at us. And my son also, since he didn't have language, he couldn't hear enough to develop language. So at age 2, he was still making sounds that weren't language. And so people would stare at us if we would go places because he didn't, the sounds he was making were not words. And so, I didn't want to ever have him feel that I was ashamed of him or that I was embarrassed, and so it was sort of, it was a real learning experience for me because I'm shy and I'm an introvert and I don't like to be in the spotlight. I don't really want attention on me ever. And people do look at what's different from them. And I don't think that's necessarily wrong. The book Wonder, which I love, that book was, R.J. Palacio says she wrote that book because her child was sort of staring at someone with a craniofacial difference. And she was like, no, like, turn away. Like, we don't want to do that. And then she realized that also while staring is maybe not ideal, also to just sort of turn away and ignore what's different from us is also not really ideal either. And so I came to appreciate more that staring at least is like, okay, maybe it's a little bit closer to curiosity than turning away, where then you really can't learn. So this picture book was also an attempt to be like, to have that mirror experience for someone else, maybe who has cochlear implants and reads the book, but also for people to realize it's okay. Like, it's okay to ask. It's okay, to see it. And just also, hopefully, maybe they just will recognize it now and not have to ask what it is.
Right. Yeah, and thank you for noticing. Thank you for listening to the podcast. We do celebrate the fact that books can be mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors. And as an old white guy who grew up with lots of books that had people looking like, well, not looking like me, they mostly had hair, but with people, I saw myself represented. So I didn't understand how important that mirror aspect was until recently. when I had a conversation with Naomi Schaefer, who was a boss clown of Clowns Without Borders, and she was talking about reading books about clown families, and I realized